In this video, I'll show you how you can use the Figaf testing tool to test your SAP CPI integrations. So we start out with obviously having an iFlow that we can test. We can see there's some OData service that calls an external service partner, and there's also a iFlow here that calls HTTP communication channel with some data. There's persist and everything like that. So all in all, standard flow with a few external calls. Now we want to create a test case for it. So the Figaf Alerting Tool has downloaded all different messages for this specific flow. So let's try to create a new test case. We will create it and put it into a test suite. We will all mark this with demo 55 for some specific reason. We can specify how many messages we want to record. For this, we only do one because all the messages processed look the same. But obviously you want to increase that and make sure that it fits with the requirement you have. Now we can start the recording, and this will then trigger this iFlow and set it into trace mode. And now I just need to trigger this iFlow, and we'll just send a message into this iFlow to ensure everything works as expected. So now this message has been sent, we can pull remote messages, and it also has a batch jobs that will do this automatically, but we don't want to wait as long time. So we can see it is in progress, downloading one of these messages, and with a bit of luck, we should be able to see that it has fetched all the data needed for this. So we got 1 inbound and 55 outbound messages for this processing. Now we can look at the data, we can see the different data that we have for this. So if we open the inbound message, we can see what data is being sent to the specific flow at the specific point in time and stuff like that. So we have all data about the flows and all the different intermediate steps in this processing. So now we have created we have the data, we can create a test case for this. We can obviously update these values to find out more about the system, and we just want to run it on one specific agent. So now we have the data, and we can run this on a specific system. We'll just select our default agent for it, and once we run it, it will then send a message into this iFlow. So if we go to the message monitor, you can see it sent this message in. We can easily see its ERT. This is a prefix of these correlation ID. That means it's really simple for us, or for the tool automatically, to compare it. So we can compare the result and see if everything is as expected. And obviously sometimes this, depending on how many messages you have, it can take some time, and the CPI performance. Here we can see the status, what's done, how many messages that it's downloaded. So now we got all the messages. We can go in here, we can view the result, and we can see if everything is as expected. Ooh, there were some errors. So let's see what these type of errors is. So we'll view the difference here. So that's an application ID that was added as a counter. That's probably okay. We add that one to the ignore list, and there was a date. Also, we'll add these two things, and if there was content in the JSON as we have up here, we could easily just click and ignore city. Then city will be ignored if we make changes to it. We have a recompare option here that will then trigger all of this, and you can see everything if it works correctly or not. So there are some other errors here. Let's see what these are. So this is still the application ID, so most likely it didn't completely do all of these yet. And if we add it again, it will just come and say this is not there. So just try to run it again. So now we can see it looks good, and everything is ignored. We have a valid test case. We can see everything works out as expected. next part is we want to make sure that if we make a change to the iFlow, that it's obviously being tested and we can see what is going on in this process. So let's just create a new version of the iFlow and deploy it. So let's just content modification here. Here we can see all this value that's been added, and we can set this to new value 2, or we can just change the payload. Let's just change the payload. Save as a version. So we now have a new version of this iFlow with some different information on it. We can deploy it, and if we then run our test again, we would obviously expect to get some differences, because this iFlow is now different than one we expected to, or the data that we had in our test suite. So let me just pause. So it took a little while because we just needed to make sure that the iFlow is deployed, and before the iFlow is deployed, we're not able to run these test cases. Now we can look at the data, we can look at the diffs, and we can see there was a new value here that we did not have before. And then we obviously need to make sure that our test case is current, so next time we run it, we will get the same result. We have an option here for it that just says mark as test case, so that means next time we run it, we should get all of them successful, because now this is our expected output. So yeah, let's run it, and then hopefully everything will be successful now. And now we can see we got a successful test case that covers all of these different things in this process. So now we've seen we're able to trigger these messages. We can run them successfully without any problems with that terms. The next thing I want to show is how you can actually run mock services, because sometimes you have tests where you are, for instance, creating success factors employees, and if you continue to create an employee, it will kind of be rejected because you cannot create the same employee multiple times. There will be a lot of differences between these things. So to do that, we have created a mocking service, and to activate this, really simple. You just go into the test configuration, say mock, or use this receiver communication. We'll just also add a bracket for mock service, and then we can, once we run this on our scenario, what we will see is that it will create a iFlow, and we can see it's being started. And if we look at this, we can see, if we look at the payload here, we will see that instead of a SOAP service here, it has then added an HTTP endpoint that is then calling the Figaf Alerting Tool over the cloud connector and pasting in all the required information. That means you're actually able to test these special scenarios where you have data, or where you cannot really resend the data, and this is just one click of the button and it will replace all these different scenarios. We can then run the test, or once the iFlow's been run, it will run the test, and we can download the messages, and everything should be successful. But yeah, it just takes a little while for it to deploy. It's all deployed now. And now if we look at the payloads that's been sent, we should see that the iFlow has been triggered. It already was. So here we send it with the payload, it's triggered and saved the different messages. So if we pull the results now, we will get the same kind of test result as had happened before. And we can view our comparison and see if everything is as expected. So yeah, so everything's successful now, but now instead of having called the external OData service, it's just called the Figaf Alerting Tool over Cloud Connector and get the payloads back in. So that means it enables you to test all the scripts, routing, processing, logic, and still preserve the data without you having to go out and create mock services for all these things. The next part I want to cover is how do you secure the test data, because previously we talked about data that was coming from your SuccessFactors systems, and that's employee data that is highly confidential. It's salary, whoever you're going to hire in 2 weeks, that may not be public knowledge, or it could be customer data from your whatever C4C system that you want to find a way to protect. And what we have done there is, when you're creating your agent, you have an option to select it as has confidential data, and you also have an option to select systems that has is secure test system. And secure test system means that users do not have access to them, and all the time when you're running data on it, it will use this as mocked data. So we will go to the confidential data agent that we have, and unfortunately we only have one agent, so they're all the same. And it's the same iFlow that's on here, so we can go create here. We can record messages, and we'll just put it into the same test case we already had. We'll create a new one. Confidential, we'll also mark it as confidential. And now we'll record this just as we've done with the other one, and I'll just get back once we created the test case on this. So now we have created the test case, and one of the things we see here is that if we open any of the messages and steps for it, what we'll see is all the data here is masked, and we can only see that there is actually a required date. It's a date field and whatever, so we will just see some things goes on, but we don't really see what's going on. I have access to view confidential data, so I can see the unmasked payload, and you can give this to the people that really should have it, so you know who is in charge and who is protecting the data, but that means contractors can create this. So now we've created it, and then to run it, we can only run it on our secured system. So if we try to run it on our non-secured system, it'll come a warning saying, hey, this is not a valid system. You can only run it on the secured system where you have added these requirements in. So we can test it, and once we run it, it will be processed in the same way. So so now we can run our comparison. We can see there's some problems here. We can view the differences here. We can view either the encoded or the original one, because I have the role. And we can then see everything, all the data here is masked, and if there was any difference, you will just see that there is a difference in this. So the amount of data you can extract for this is just number of orders, number of employees, but not really what they're getting in salary or anything else. So I guess that's still the same problem. We have these things that just need to be ignored, and then we can process this part. But this gives us an ability to handle even complicated data that we don't really know what the data is. So another challenge you sometimes find is that you have scenarios that is a little more complicated. For this, we have created a scenario here. It's called double flow. And the challenge with this double flow here is that we have an HTTP sender, we have a SOAP or SFTP, and we have a timer. All of these then called a single process direct connection, and this is obviously really a challenge if you want to be able to test how this works. So what we have implemented is you can record it the same way. So let's go back to our testing case, and we will select this that's called the double flow. Double flow on. So here we have the double flow here. We will record messages. Specify how many messages. For this, there's not that many payloads in it, so it's pretty good to just create a number of flows for this. And we'll start the recording here. And then we need to deploy it. And there's also an HTTP endpoint that we need to call. If I have it correctly here. Double flow run. Oh. Good. So now we've run it a few times, and we should be able to pull these messages. See how many messages we'll get. So we got 3 messages and 13 outbound, and we can create this as a test case the same way. We can run it on a number of different systems. And now we can run this, and we'll just say run on our normal development system. And what it will then do is it will then run this on, maybe it will deploy it. It will create a new version of it, just as we had in the other, the mock scenario. So we can see here it's being started as a double flow mock. We got a number of different endpoints for all of these different ways to start the flow. And then, so we can see, for instance, this the scheduled one was just changed to another scenario. And then once this has been deployed, it should then trigger the messages in just the same way as we just did with the mocked service, and then we should get the results of this. So now we can see this double mock flow has been triggered with our test case, and if we pull this one, we will then be able to fetch all of these different data that we have for this case. And the result is, I don't know, let's see. Yeah, so really simple to set up this enable mocking, being able to run all of the scenarios without having to do a lot of groundwork. So everything worked out successfully. We can see the different messages, and we got a different step here. I think that's because after the scheduled service, we needed to add a few components, so you can go around these call activities and find what is relevant in this place. So another one we have is that if you, for instance, have a PI you want to migrate, we have a really easy way you can create test cases in the PI world. So here we have a PI system. We can select an ICO, one or more ICOs. We can create it as a test case just the same way as we did with the other one. Run it, and once we have created one of these test cases, really simple, we can then go and select it. On here, we have here the option here to migrate to CPI test case, where you can then select which test suites to add, and then you can specify which is the scenario that you want to run this in, and then it will take the data from your PI, the input message, send it into the CPI system, and then you can go around and figure out which target systems that you wanna, or which component should be ignored and which is important for this process. Then the last thing we have is to make it easier for you to test in your Groovy scripts. And one of the things we have here is, so if we have our test case here, where we have Groovy Scripting, get customer orders, so we have order 2 here in the faster package, and one of the components here, the one we just created here, we have the option here to see all the data we have, and we have an option here to generate Groovy scripts. And this will then create a Groovy script, all the mocks and everything that you need for you to run this specific test case on your CPI Groovy scripts in a Git repository that it also provides. So this is a part of the DevOps package that make it easier for you to really handle all the development process. So if we then go to our IntelliJ, we can then download this or pull this from the repository, and what we'll then see is in our package we have added all the iFlows you have access to. We have then a set of test data. It's probably easier to see here, so we can see we have just added this test data, and the idea is that you will then get this completed process in place that allows you to add these things in and output messages is placed in these data here. So you can see all the input, output, and header properties. And then from here, you can then run this Groovy script, and you can then see, is this in line with what we expect? Are there any differences or any challenges that we need to see per the really big difference and the importance of what this can do. So there's a header difference here that we obviously should take care of, and the other one ran successfully. One of the things you can do is, if you, for instance, have a script, let's take the header 2, we will set this into debug mode, and that means if we go here, and so in this template that we provide, set run in debug mode, it will start up the debugger, and it will allow us to go through the processing and see what we're receiving, and then we can see at this specific time the message look like this, and this makes it a lot easier for you to debug the CPI scripts and being able to edit them easier. I hope you enjoyed this and could see the benefit of what this tool can do. If you want to check it out, go to figaf.com/figaf.com, and then you can find the product. There's the Figaf testing solution here, and here you can find a lot of all these different things that you have. And if you want to try it out, there's this button up here that just enables you to fill in your name and an email address, and you can start up trying the tool and see all these features, how they apply to your scenarios. So thanks for watching.